Pink flower painting with watercolors. This is a live painting session of a rock trumpet flower painting. Step-by-step tutorial on how to paint this flower with watercolors. I will start to record it. So I have my line drawing over here, transferred with the help of the graphite stick. I use a graphite stick on the other side. I mark my outlines, then I turn around, place it carefully on a piece of paper on which I will be painting. And then I again trace the outline. Be very careful, don't push too hard, just enough for the graphite to. Then with the 0.3 mechanical pencil I go over the graphite marks again, and with an elastic eraser, this is from, it looks like this in art shops, kneadable art eraser, I call it elastic eraser. It's from Faber-and-Castell, and for example this one here lasts already for I don't know, maybe 8 months. And if it starts to get dirty, I just in different direction knead it and differently squeeze it, and then it's clean again. And for the watercolor painting, it is very important to remove the excess amount of graphite from the paper. Graphite marks can be really disturbing. If the finished painting, which is very beautifully painted, and if there will be visible graphite marks, it can really make a bad look and dirty look, muddy look. Those graphite marks we don't want to be visible. So as you can see, I removed and it became much lighter. If the subject is this subject is not so light, but if this would be a white flower, we would need more removing of the outer edges so that it's clean and neat. Like this. And to clean the paper, we're not using hand. We are with a big brush. Less we are touching the paper, the better. Now to watercolor mixing. Have my water, brushes, and paints. For this flower, I will be using, this is pink. We can see, of course, this is pink, so I'm taking permanent rose. It can be opera rose, it can be even Rose Madère Lake. What else? Which else pigment could be? You can try, test whatever pink you have. It's important to experiment with the pigments that you have. Don't run to the shop and buy new pigments just because some new art teacher has different pigments. No. Really, before doing that, test your own. Also, I can see some violets there, so I'm taking manganese violet, placing on the other side of on the color palette. I also see a little bit of red, especially on the tips and in some half-tone areas, closer to shadow areas. So I'm placing Sennelier Red and a little bit of Alizarin Crimson. Like this, to have, and in the middle we have a very beautiful middle section. Here, I'll show you this one here. It's very sunny, bright, orangey yellow. I'm taking lemon yellow, which is closer to the middle part. Then a little bit of Indian yellow. Also, we'll place it here on the side. I'm not mixing all together, I'm just placing. And I think Sennelier Red will work as well. Let's test on a piece of paper and see what we have. Permanent rose with manganese violet for the petals. Then we will have permanent rose with a little touch of Sennelier Red and Alizarin Crimson for the darker shadow areas and halftones. Nicely, good transition. And the middle part we will have lemon yellow, Indian yellow, a little bit darker, and Sennelier Red, which mixed together with the Indian yellow creates orange color, which we, in this case, we will be needing. Maybe in some areas I will add a little touch of Perylene Violet, some darker violet color. In the description later, when I will upload this tutorial, I will write down all the pigments that I'm using right now. But again, please experiment with the pigments that you have before running to art shop. I know it's tempting and maybe thinking that some special pigment will help. No, it's all about mastering the watercolor mixes with the pigments that you have. After mixing watercolors, it's important to change water so you are not painting with dark, dirty water. I have two glasses always. One is with the dirty water and one is with clean water. And let's start painting. I start always one section at a time. Be sure that your brush is also clean. Applying water, showing you how it glows, just enough so that there's no dripping water off from the paper surface, just enough for the watercolors to be moved. They're not floating on the surface. You will see. I'm taking manganese violet and with a little touch of permanent rose. I have a paper towel in my left hand. And I will start slowly, transparently, not too dark, not too saturated. Apply watercolors where I can see are the darker areas. It's not like the issue, but how I start always from the darker area. And then I move slowly to the lightest area. I move and push watercolors towards the lightest part, which is here. Sorry for the background sound. Here I'm pushing with round synthetic brush. First layers, watery layers, I'm applying with a round synthetic brush. And if you feel that your surface starts to become quite dry, add a little bit of water and continue. It's better to add water while you paint, rather you don't know how to react because everything is too watery and you don't know how to paint. There are some in the middle. I can see a little bit darker line. So the first layer is very transparent. It's better to go lighter rather than darker. Darker with watercolors, we can always manage to go very dark. It's the problem later to go lighter. While the surface is moist, I'm adding a little bit more to some shadow area. And here looking carefully where are some darker marks, looking for tonal values. This tip is a little bit more to the red side. Like this, and then also this part is a little bit darker and slightly becomes lighter. Slowly, no rush, transparently, we have first petal down. Going to the next one. If you have questions during the process, ask or write in the chat box. I'm skipping one petal, so I'm not disturbing the one which is still a little bit wet, and moving to the next one. Like again, watery layer, manganese violet with a little touch of permanent rose. Here is more, tip is more reddish. First layer is nothing too realistic, nothing too precise, just putting lights and darks in places and color tones. Keeping transparency, light of the watercolor medium. When we are painting transparently, we know that everything is manageable. We can fix if there's some problems. If we will go straight with very dark watercolor mixes, then it's going to be a problem later on, because there will be no room to build more saturated layers to get a realistic look. Here, where the petal is starting to curve, there is a little bit darker, more saturated pink color. And we are not going the same strength that we see in the reference. We will be building that gradually. While the surface is wet, adding a little bit more where is the shadow. The tip is in the shadow area. As you can see, everything is very transparent and light. The saturation will come later. And as well, constantly my eyes are running from the paper to the reference. I'm checking if I'm placing in the right places shadows and leaving light as it should be, and I'm always keeping the lightest area more wider than it looks in the reference. Now going to this one, which is very beautifully curved petal. Applying water. And taking permanent rose. This curve is beautifully in the shadow and more to the pink side. Then it slowly becomes lighter and more to the violet side. As you can see, I'm placing different pigments. I also don't over mix on my color palette, so I have a very fresh watercolor mixes. When we are too over mixing, it starts to look muddy. The pigments, they have little parts inside, color pigments, and they tend, if we over mix too many pigments together, they can start to look muddy. and we don't want that. It's better to mix 3 pigments is nice number, and 5 is already too much. Taking finer tip brush, and there's the other side of a little curve which is in the shadow. Carefully painting so I'm not disturbing. And the tip is more to the pink side. This is still very raw. Everything is not as it looks like in the reference. I call these first layers an ugly stage because you really don't know if you are going right and if everything looks, it doesn't look as in a reference. With experience I start to accept this stage, but in the beginning when I was just starting watercolor painting I was really struggling with this ugly stage. And this one here, permanent rose with a little touch of red mix, starting from the shadow area with the round synthetic brush, pushing watercolors. Here is also a beautiful shadow area. And pushing watercolors. Taking manganese violet. And a little bit of permanent rose. Adding more to the shadow area. Everything is very light and very watery. Then this curve part is very light because light is hitting that surface, and then it goes very saturated and pink. And smooth the applied layer with clean and dry brush. We have the last petal left. Applying water. Starting from a reddish mix. There's on the tip is more red color. Then taking permanent rose with manganese violet and push towards the lightest parts. Technique is the same. I'm just constantly looking at reference because where is shadow and where is light for each petal is different. In realistic painting it's different rather than illustration where we just paint assuming that light is there and shadows are there, but in realistic painting it's important every little curve, every little change in tonal values, everything is important. Taking everything into careful observation. Okay, we have first layer applied for the petals. And now we can slowly start checking if everything is dry. Another thing, if you really need to wait for a long time for the surface to get dry, it means that you are using too much water. And I don't use too much water, that's why I'm also using little glass with water, not big jars. And on my color palette you can see that it's already starting to get dry, and if I need to have it a little bit moist, I add a little bit of water, very small. On the tip of the brush, water is added to my color palette. And I can now come back to the first petal that I painted, add a little bit more of transparent watercolors to the shadow area, and still I'm painting transparently. This flower is very saturated and bright, but it also have a lot of light spots, and we need to keep this lightness of this flower to make it very fluffy but still realistic. All extra layers are also added very transparently with the tip of the brush. So I'm in control of how it goes slowly to darker, more saturated color. We can always make it darker. It will be a problem to make it lighter. And it's all about layers, 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 layers to get a realistic looking subject with watercolors. Keeping lightest areas light and adding watercolors where we see, and mostly painting from the shadow side towards the lightest part. Constantly checking with reference. The more we look, the more we start to see and notice. Adding little details like some color transitions, what we see. Smooth the applied layer. Nothing too obvious in the first layers, just a little notions that there are curves and turns, and we are creating this, modeling this flower with beautiful petals. Here is a beautiful cast shadow area from the other petal. Smoothing. Now we will let this petal to rest, and we can work on this middle part. Taking lemon yellow, and I'm not watering this area because it's very little, and we can gradually mix watercolors while they are still wet. Adding Indian yellow to the very upper part. Taking Sennelier Red and carefully mixing into Indian yellow. Notice where's the lightest part and where's the darkest part in the middle section. Now washing my brush and smoothing the applied Sennelier Red. leaving here on the left side, this upper part, light yellow. Permanent rose. Mixing, there is a beautiful edge where pink meets orangey color. And smooth out with a clean and dry brush. Again, carefully mix them together. And smooth out with clean and dry brush. I wash it in a glass with water and dry it, and then I smooth. Again, taking permanent rose, carefully mixing with the edge of Sennelier Red and Indian Yellow. Washing my brush, cleaning in paper towel, and smoothing the applied layer. We have a little notion of how this middle part will look, but still we have a lot of work there to do. I'm mixing Indian Yellow with Sennelier Red and adding more to the area which is much darker than these two petals. This is the inner part of the flower and it's quite dark and saturated, but still adding gradually and accurately the darkness. Taking permanent rose, again a little bit, and another layer for the border part. And also here. We can paint this little stamen which is inside with the lemon Indian Yellow. I will add a little bit of Perylene Violet. It's a little bit darker than the rest of the area inside. It's not nice to leave a white spot because it's a little bit messing with our understanding where's the depth and what is going on there. It already looks interesting because we have a feeling that something is going inside. Also a little bit darkness on this side. And smooth out. We will come back to this middle part again. Now we can continue with the petals. Taking round synthetic brush, permanent rose with manganese violet, and add another layer to the shadow part. Adding watercolors, washing brush, cleaning in paper towel, and smoothing the applied layer. So we have smooth and gradual transitions. Carefully wash, clean, and smooth. Push towards the lightest part. We are not into detailing right now, like petal veins, some lines, spots. We are building base color for the details. smoothing the applied layer. Again, moving to the next petal. And smooth out. Then we have a darker area here on this side. And a little bit here. Wash and smooth. Now going to this one. Wash and smooth the applied layer. Taking manganese violet, very transparently add to the left side of the petal. And a little bit on the right, but leaving the lightest part for now untouched. Maybe a little edge here needs more attention here. So we have a feeling that it is coming over this one. And then we have a curve over here. Okay, we have a question. Could you describe the brushes you are using? Short, hair, soft. I'm painting practically all my tutorials with two brushes. Fine tip brush, which is a mix of synthetic and natural fiber, and round, simple synthetic brush. I have two brushes and that's it. I don't use a lot of brush of different type of brushes. These two brushes, and I'm painting with them all my tutorials. Maybe if I would have a very huge, large painting with big flower, I would take maybe then this brush for applying water, and that's my maximum, I think. Yes. And these brushes I have are lasting already from the January. So, and this tip, why I like synthetic or mix of synthetic and natural fiber, because they last for a very long time. I was painting with natural fiber watercolor brushes. They're super expensive, but they last a few paintings. After few paintings, the tip goes off, and it's not anymore fine. It starts to get round. So, and they are expensive, and I started to experiment with synthetic brushes and find the best solution was mix, especially for the fine tip brush. For the round synthetic brush, it's completely synthetic and it makes a very smooth washes. It also, if I need to lift some pigment from the surface, also does a great job. So these two brushes are my go-to brushes. Adding here, there is the shadow of the overlapping petal. And smoothing out. Adding a little bit darkness over here, again slowly. And it goes a little bit deeper. And here as well, a little bit deeper. Let's add another layer here to make it even more saturated and darker. Now it's important part when we have a completely dry surface and still graphite marks are visible. I take the eraser and very carefully, without pushing too hard, I'm erasing some graphite outlines which are still visible. Don't rub too hard and be sure that your surface is completely dry. If it will be slightly wet, you can only damage the paper with the erasing. And with the brush, removing dust from erasing. Moving forward, slowly. Taking Perylene Violet, mixing with a little amount of permanent rose, and adding more darkness to the inner part, to the very edge part. We see that there's very slight darkness visible with the stippling, almost very uneven brush strokes, adding that darker color. What about the type of paper I'm using? I'm using Saunders Waterford hot pressed high white paper, 600 GSM. Also, yeah, I'm painting on the hot press because for very detailed work, smooth surface is the best. I will add permanent rose here. Also, I like Canson Moulin de Roy 300 GSM. Also very smooth, very nice paper, absorbs water for many layers. For my painting style and realistic watercolor painting, it's important to have, for the paper to able to absorb many layers. Slowly adding more layers. Carefully, transparently, we don't have to rush things. And adding mix of Sennelier Red with Indian Yellow. Hello newcomers, we are painting here. Hopefully I will fix the issue with the YouTube for the next session, but to not lose the time and wonderful flower painting session, we are continuing in the Zoom. And repeating that this session is recording and I will upload to YouTube, and it will be available for everyone to watch. Adding Perylene Violet to the stamen, there is a little dividing section for that little stamen, and I'm adding with the very tip of the brush to get this stamen look realistic, and that's inside the flower, create depth, and painting gradually, adding darkness gradually with the very tip of the brush. And it already looks that it's somewhere inside. Adding more darkness to this right side middle part because it's in the shadow. Taking yellow, a mix of lemon yellow with Indian yellow. And adding more layer to this lightest part because it's very brightish yellow. Adding Sennelier here on the top part. And smoothing a little bit. Okay, let's continue with petals. They are dry. We can work further. This little curve needs a little bit more darkness. Then we have here, this curve is in the shadow. Taking round synthetic brush and smoothing. Adding manganese violet to this side. And also here I can see, the more I look, again, the more I look in the reference, the more I start to notice. That's how our eyesight works. Smoothing. Adding more here. And here. I'm now looking at overall look for this flower, and we'll be jumping from one petal to another to get the right tonal values, shadow areas. Missing shadow here. Like you see, we can always add some darker layer. The problem is with the light. And I always leave the lightest part wider because I know with layers I will make it more smaller, more closer to reference. Also here we have a little darker area than petal on the right side. And gradually becomes lighter. If we will leave from the beginning the lightest area as it looks in the reference, we will end up with a dark subject, because after layers it will just gradually cover everything. That's why I'm leaving wider light from the beginning, and then I gradually, with halftones, make it as it is in the reference. Adding permanent rose to the curved parts, and with the round synthetic brush, smooth the applied layer. So I have gradual and nice transitions. And as I apply somewhere a darker area, instantly other petals ask a little bit for darkness in some areas. That's the thing about contrast, where we add darkness, and if that area is missing darkness, it instantly asks, please paint me as well a little bit darker. And lighter area becomes lighter, also because of the contrast. So we are slowly building the saturation. Adding more here. Smoothing. I can see that I need a little bit darkness here. There's a little curve. Again, the more I look in the reference, the more I notice what I haven't noticed in the beginning. Adding a little bit more of permanent rose. Oh, a little bit too much, but that's okay. Not a problem. And let's add a little bit more contrasty details in some areas. And even the line, I smoothly go over it so it's not so obvious and crisp, because in real life those petal veins are slightly blended into the petal. Applying line and going over with the clean and dry brush, so it's like sinking into the petal, into the surface. There is a line also, and it goes somewhere there, and smoothing the applied line. Then we have a darkness over here. And more contrast here. Slowly building that saturation. It's all about observation skills of your reference. And over here we have a shadow. Again, petal is overlapping and creating a shadow on the other petal. Slowly we are moving out of the ugly stage and into some kind of visuals that we have on the reference. It takes time, it takes patience, but it's definitely worth it to paint gradually and transparently, because you know you are in control. You can anytime fix everything. If you will go straight with dark watercolor mixes, well, it will be hard to change that and to correct some mistakes which definitely appear when you are painting very dark and saturated, or you finish with a flat looking painting. Adding a very accurate edge line, but I'm adding a darker edge line only in those areas which are visible in the reference that there are some darker edge lines. I'm not outlining all the areas to separate one from another. No, we're separating only with the shadow, with tonal values. If we need to turn for more better brush strokes, we can do that anytime. I'm doing correctly? No. Need to check the direction of these beautiful textured lines on the petals. We have also here a line which goes straight from up till the middle part and smooth the applied line. And let's add here as well more permanent rows, very gradually, very slowly. We have a feeling that these petals are curvy and moving, and that is what we need to achieve. We need to we are not aiming for 100% accuracy, but what we need to get the characteristic look of the subject. And that is only by observing your reference, painting gradually, and we have different color tones here, from violet to pink to red. Adding that, it only will make the painting more interesting. We are not sticking to one color. We are exploring and trying to notice different color tones here. Adding more color to those lines in the middle. And also in the beginning make them very light so you are sure of the direction, and then you can go again and make those lines more accurate, more precise. Again, don't go with very dark lines in the beginning. If you will go gradually and lightly, you can correct those lines. Taking a round synthetic brush, adding more permanent rows to some areas where I can see I need more pink color. Here, building gradually and transparently. here, shadow area. Again, noticed only now. The more I look, the more I start to see. That's how our eyesight works. Also here, more pink color. As you can see, gradually our lightest parts are becoming not so big and light. We are adding more and more layers. And thinking of the whole subject. In the beginning, I was thinking of each petal separately, individually, and now I'm jumping from one petal to another because I'm exploring this flower as a whole. I have a nice pigment red violet, which is from Mijello, and I want to add it now because it really looks that we need more saturated color. We'll add it here. Carefully with the tip of the brush, carefully with little brush strokes, I'm pushing that more saturated color inside the inner part. To have a more gradual transition. And also with the round synthetic brush, I'm taking this red violet. We'll add it here. And here. And smooth the applied layers. Permanent rose, more here. Leaving light area light. Then a little bit of here. Smoothing. As well as here. Smoothing. And here. I will leave the petals to rest and add of Perylene Violet. There are some edges which are very dark, so with the very tip of the brush, very accurately, I will make a very fine edge lines. And the very tip is a little bit darker. And then going to the other side. If we need, we can turn around. And carefully with the very tip, almost with one hair of the brush, we have a very nice dark edge. And be careful with those outlining edges. Only do that if that is visible in the reference. I so often see paintings with dark edge lines just because to separate some areas. That doesn't look good. That doesn't look good. This one goes over here like this. For example, here we have only half of the petal visible that there is a dark edge line, so I'm not outlining the whole section. As well as here, no, 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 and then it's a little bit of darker edge line here, and again disappearing. And it gives a better feeling, more realistic. Where we see more dark edge lines, a little bit of here on this tip, and again only closer to the finishing part of this petal we have a darker edge line. Also a little bit of here. These little details are very important. They help us build a realistic looking subject. So here I want to add a little bit darkness. It seems that now it's all about seeing little things, noticing little details, and adding them to our painting. Taking this red color mix and adding those beautiful lines in the middle. Again, very accurately, carefully, following the direction that we see in the reference. And here is a little bit darker area. A little bit darkness over here. Checking tonal values. And we can work a little bit more on the stamen, give him a little bit more darkness. There's something inside. And more contrast. Now it's all about comparing, noticing little things, little transitions, overall view. We are at the finishing stage. With realistic painting, if we are painting transparently, there's almost no finishing. It's only a matter of time and patience, but if we are painting transparently, we can really go on and on. That is the beauty of this medium, that we can add more and more details, make it more and more realistic. Add another layer, another detail, and only make it more interesting, but the main thing is to do it transparently. Then we will have capability to paint and create a realistic looking painting. Darkness over here. My limit is the time. I can't make tutorials which would be 5-10 hours long, but for realistic watercolor painting, if you want to be in art shows and exhibition, then you need to really work your paintings. If you're painting for yourself, it's only a matter of your likes and dislikes. A little bit more to the stamen. It's a little bit darker. And a little bit more darkness here as well. You can see that I need to add more darkness here. Now it's all about comparing one section with another and checking if everything is good, is correct. And adding more darkness here, separating petal from the inner part. More here. Okay, now we're at the finishing stage. If you have questions, you can now ask, you can unmute yourself or write in a chat box. If there are some questions, you can ask. I'm still adding some finishing touches because I can still see that I can go on and on. I'm building these petals like already I have a feeling that they are three-dimensional, and I'm building that form, those curves. And later, this tutorial will be available on YouTube channel to follow along, to pause whenever you need, and paint along. And when you're painting, please also follow the reference so you understand what you are painting, not just blindly following what I'm doing, but also understand what you are doing. It's important for you to learn, not just follow blindly tutorial. I'm all about teaching that students can go and paint on their own. Their reference is what they want, not just what I'm showing and making tutorials. Okay, I will stop here. There's still a place and space where to paint. Thank you for watching this tutorial. Hope you learned something new and painted along this rock trumpet flower. Thank you and see you in my next tutorials. Bye bye.